Good afternoon, and welcome to the next installment of the Backyard Banters. I am fortunate enough to have today Shanna Peele, who is the president of the Buncombe County Association of Educators, and is here to talk about education. I'm a huge fan of education, and I'm assuming you are as well.
Of course.
If you don't mind, I'll let you introduce yourself a little bit further, your work, what you're doing. I'll chime in with my thoughts with the little bit that I know about education, and hopefully by the end of this interview, I'll know a lot more and be able to help you educate our kids better.
Okay, great. Yeah, so my name is Shanna Peele. I grew up here in Buncombe County. I attended Buncombe County schools, graduated from Irwin High.
All right.
I attended public schools my whole life throughout college. And then when I started working for the schools, started right here in Buncombe County. Originally started as a Title I assistant.
Mm-hmm.
So that meant that I worked with small groups, working on their reading skills, and then eventually found a job teaching special ed at Woodfin Elementary.
Oh, cool.
So I've served as the special ed teacher at Woodfin on and off since 2011. And now serve full-time as the president for Buncombe County Association of Educators. I also have 3 kids, and they all attend Asheville City Schools, so really have, a foot in both worlds for
Yes.
our 2 school systems here in Buncombe County.
Absolutely. So you represent teachers for both systems, county and city, or just the county and some kind of overlap with the city as well?
Yeah, it's real cool. So I'm the president for Buncombe County Association of Educators, and we're a wall-to-wall union, so it means anybody who works for the school system can join.
Okay.
And then we have a sister union who
Oh.
is Asheville City Association of
Focused on the city.
Educators.
Okay.
Yeah, so we work together a lot of times because we have the same decision makers in a lot of cases, especially county commission. And our working conditions are quite similar in both school systems as they are across the state.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'd like to kind of throw in a few stats since I'm kind of geeky and I like to study things and look at things. And I've always thought that education is powerful and worthwhile. I've felt it in my heart. I've thought it in my mind. But I've also been looking at some statistics, and it turns out that it's actually quite powerful, that globally there's about a 10% increase in hourly earnings associated with each additional year of schooling, according to the World Bank. It's also obviously a powerful tool for poverty reduction, both for individuals and for nations. I mean, that's where my focus is that our whole nation can benefit from better education, not just the individual. World Bank notes that equitable access to quality education significantly increases a country's GDP per capita over time. Higher levels lead to greater employment opportunities and a wider range of career choices, which gives us more competitive nature in this difficult and ever-changing employment market worldwide. Per capita, in 2022, those who did not complete high school in the United States made about $35,500 a year, below the current cost of living. High school completers made around 41, still quite low, unfortunately. And those with a bachelor's degree average about 66, masters or higher about 80. Huge differences. I mean, this exponential difference based on education. And I personally don't think that applies only to the branch of high school versus college versus advanced college. I think that if we had the ability to statistically look closer, we would find the same kind of differences for high quality public education systems versus areas that have lower quality educational systems. And that's where my focus is that I want to strengthen the middle schools, the high schools, everything in public education. I want people to come out, in my perfect world, with either a trade that they can make real money at and keep the economy moving, because we need these trades and it's bogging down the economy that we can't find them, or their first year of college complete. So what do you think about that particular goal? Do you think that's realistic? Do you think that we can do it as a nation? And honestly, how much do you think it would cost, and where do you think the money should come from?
Ooh, that's a loaded
Because
question.
that's always the hard part, right?
Yeah,
It always
yeah.
comes down to the money. And in my opinion, we're throwing away dollars to save dimes by skimping on education. The numbers are clear. Reductions in teen pregnancy, reductions in incarceration, massive reductions. I mean, for incarceration specifically, if you drop out of high school, you are 63% likely to spend a significant part of your life in jail versus someone who went to college just for a basic bachelor's degree. Even that alone makes a call to pay for education that keeps people engaged and keeps people in the education system. So with that said, it's my job as a politician to make the plea to get the money to make it happen, and I'll elaborate more on that later. But first, from you, an idea of what do you think we need specifically as far as ratios, resources, to make our schools even better, even stronger?
Yeah, well, as I know, our public schools are full of really dedicated staff who are working around the clock, working over their contract hours tirelessly to make sure that our kids get what they need. I'm talking from the bus lot to the office staff to the teachers in the classrooms and the custodians, making sure we have a safe and healthy place to work. So there's already a lot of really great things going on in our public schools. What we need is more of that. What we need is more funding per pupil that would allow for competitive wages, for folks to work only one job, by offering a living wage to all staff. So that we can make sure that our students have access to technology and paper and books that doesn't depend on whether the teacher has the money in their pocketbook to afford to buy those supplies.
I see teachers buying these things out of their own pockets, which are slim, and like you said, they're working 2 jobs, they're depending on the income from their spouse. And my thought and what I see in our education system with my 2 kids in it, with my wife Natalie being a very strong participant in the PTA and Public School Strong, is that this is one of the few places where the government is working really efficiency. Like, we have this high degree of efficiency. We have people working, like you said, working extra, going the extra mile because of the dedication. And so I think that you're right, that we can harness that dedication and that power by putting a little bit more money here and there and potentially get a lot better outcome without a whole lot of cash outlay from the American taxpayer. And to get more specific about where I think that should come from, that comes from me. It's a funny thing to say, but for example, in 2019, I made a lot of money. I had a good accountant, I had a profession that lended itself to loopholes, and I paid an 8% federal tax rate. And closing those loopholes will be very unpopular amongst those who benefit from them, but would allow us to drop tax rates for everyday payers and would allow us to put that little bit more money into our schools to make sure that students come out well educated, prepared to enter the workforce, make money, stay out of jail, avoid teen pregnancy, all these things that quality schools can do for us. So I'm sorry, I'll let you back in there as more of the nuts and bolts of what you think needs to happen here on our side.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I know that our decision makers really face that challenge of what is the balance of raising taxes, lowering taxes, making sure that our everyday taxpayer can afford their taxes, but at the same time, can we afford to not have fully funded public schools?
That's the question. Yes, and I agree that we cannot. We are shooting ourselves in the foot by pulling money out of education.
Right, and I mean, you would be really hard pressed to find statistics that show the opposite of what you've already started sharing.
I looked on the other side too. I was like, are there places that people are not educated and are doing well financially? There are not.
Right. So, when it comes to a workforce that's ready to exceed and succeed and excel, came out as exceed. When it comes to having a workforce that's ready to excel at any job out there, when it comes to students who are ready to go on and succeed in college or whatever program that they want to go to past high school, it really comes back to, do they have access to the most that we can give them in their public schools, access to staff members who are going to help them develop the critical thinking skills, the durable skills that they need in order to have those critical thinking skills in the workplace, or when it comes to voting, or when it comes to becoming the next politicians who are going to make decisions for our country. We want them to be able to make the best decisions, not only for them, but for the next layer of our community around us.
Absolutely. And you bring up a good point of not only should we teach better, but we should make sure that we are teaching the things that count. My thought is that when children are very young, we need to teach them how to get along with each other, how to play together, and make sure that that is done in a fashion that allows them to build where, correct me if I'm wrong, because you know more about this than I do, but the No Child Left Behind ideas of pushing reading and writing at an early age, while yes, they do improve these scores somewhat, my belief is that they do so at the expense of these basic human operating together skills, which per all of the business management and how to get rich over time books that I've read through the years, they all consistently say that it's these people skills and these basic skills that count. And the other side of that you mentioned with raising good citizens, that our schools should teach people to understand the difference between truth and false, should teach them to understand how to look at a statistic they see on Facebook and find the source and say, oh, even though this Facebook poster is someone I like, the actual source of that statistic leans too far left or too far right for me to actually want to believe. Or they're not doing this right. And I think that, some civics, some good history, some good understanding of knowledge and of digesting the news would potentially be very helpful for us as we move forward, especially in this very divisive political climate that we're in.
Right. Absolutely. And the beautiful thing is that our public schools, the folks that work in them are professionals. They know what they're doing. They have tons of experience in doing it. They have also gone through rigorous programs to be able to work in the schools. And if we look to the experts in the field and what they're saying,
yes,
they're saying we need more. We need more of them in the classroom so that we can continue to meet students' needs as our world becomes more and more fast-paced. It trickles down to the kids as well, and they are going to continue to need more services. And our funding, especially with my experience here in North Carolina, our funding has not kept up with their needs.
Yeah, and I've been in that fight, going to Raleigh last week and going to the Buncombe County Commissioners meeting the week before, and we're losing both those fights.
Right.
I went with a huge crew of people to both of these, and in both places, even the Democrats elected to the Buncombe County Board failed to fund our schools with what we need. They were that afraid to do a small tax raise, and they were that afraid to change the tax rates to where people who own a $700,000 house are paying a little bit more percentage-wise than somebody who's barely squeaking by in their $150,000 house. It's not all their fault. There is some state law that prevents that, but it is still something that irks me that there are plenty of people in Buncombe County who could afford to pay a little bit more property taxes. I'm one of them, and I'm happy to do it. There are people who can't, and the fact that we're all tangled up together makes it much harder to get the education we need to make this county wealthy and strong. In my opinion, I have different facets to my personality. I'm a Democrat, I'm a human, I'm a capitalist. And education is one of the few issues where all of my facets wholeheartedly agree that we need to fund. Even if I look at this purely as a capitalist, I'm a business owner. I need skilled, qualified people to work for me. They need to know what they're doing. They need to be well educated. I can't run my business without them. And I need a strong middle class who's making money to buy the products that I create. So for me, putting my money into education is a good investment. So it baffles me that so many people in similar positions to me want to withhold their tax money and not educate our kids, which would help them out in their financial future. It just baffles me. It's, to me, short-sighted.
Right.
So this is probably beyond your scope, but you may have some ideas of how we reach people, how we help people see that education is worth investing in, that our future, our children's future, is worth investing in.
Yeah. Well, I think we have to keep talking about it first. It takes showing up at your PTA meetings. It takes going to your county commission meeting, your school board meeting, to your legislator. Whether you travel to Raleigh or whether you just go and have a conversation with them at the next event. Continuing to find out what are the issues, what are the opportunities, how do we move towards the opportunities, and then talking to your neighbors, talking to the folks at the place where you worship, or in line at the grocery store. it is going to take continued conversations, lots of conversations, and sharing the knowledge we have, and opening up our minds to learning more about the situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you don't mind, I'll switch tracks a bit, because I've got this idea that I think would be affordable, and I think would reduce the dropout rates and would increase the acceleration of learning. So if you are, for example, a kid in school who is far ahead, your parents gave you a head start, you've got a natural knack for reading, you don't have any degree of dyslexia or ADD, and you can rip through schoolwork and move forward, you hit a wall really quickly. And you stop, and you're just stuck there, and you're bored, and you're stagnating mentally. If, on the other hand, you are struggling with reading, you have trouble with a little dyslexia, ADD, or it's just not really your thing, and you're working towards it, you're stressed because the rest of the class is ahead of you, it seems like a whole, and I've been on both sides of that as a student, and it's really stressful on either side. So my thought is that we have these courses in high school, instead of this year of reading, we have little mini units that are designed to run for perhaps 2 or 3 weeks that are at a certain level of reading. And we allow some fluid motion between those units. And a teacher would teach this unit of reading, a very precise and small amount of material that he or she would get really good at teaching. And students would come to them from whatever level below and would spend however much time they need in that level with no pressure to keep up with the class and nothing holding them back if they can accelerate. I think it would be complicated, but I think you could do it with the same ratios, because you'd have a group of students that are at a similar level. So instead of spending so much time as a teacher trying to entertain those who are wanting to run ahead and trying to bring up those who are falling behind, you instead have a group of students who is at the same level, and you can focus on getting them through that part. So my thought is something like that could make things more efficient. But I'm not an educator. So I'm curious about your ideas, like what you think. Is this a cockamamie scheme? Is this something that could work? And be honest. Don't be afraid to tell me this won't work and this is why.
Yeah, I don't think I have... I think I would have to ask some more questions about that scenario to be able to give you a straightforward answer.
Yeah.
I also have taught in elementary school, and sometimes when I hear about what it's like and what it takes to plan courses at the high school level, my mind is blown.
Some intense stuff.
It's funny because I don't think I could ever teach high school, and I hear high school teachers all the time who are like, I could never teach elementary school.
Yes. I hear both.
We all have our own lanes. But one thing I do know is there are lots of great ideas out there about how we could run things differently. Educators are always thinking creatively about how we can meet more student needs with less and less every year. And we're doing it, but there is a breaking point. And so what we need...
I fear we're getting close to that as I see these budgets getting squeezed and educators working so hard to try to fill these gaps. I feel like things are going to start collapsing if we keep pushing all in this direction. It really makes me sad.
And we see our school board and county commissioners and decision makers, our superintendent, making really hard choices about... like right now in Asheville City, I know that they're already deciding to cut hours for our lowest paid employees in Asheville City schools. Last year, earlier you talked about digital learning, how to be safe in this digital world. And we want our children to be safe out there. We last year lost all of our STEM teachers in Buncombe County. Asheville City just had to cut some of their digital.
My kids are so sad about that. They're geeks like me, and they love that stuff. And they're so sad to have lost it. And so are their future employers.
Yes, I was about to say the same thing. And where are all of our careers headed? They need to know how to use technology.
Yes, especially as we advance technologically.
Right.
Yes, we need these basic skills, but we need to know how to use technology. We need to know how to use science. That's what has kept America strong and kept us ahead on the world stage. And I feel like we're thrown away. I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir, but it frustrates me so badly that we're not investing in making America stronger.
Right. So what we need is, politicians who are not afraid to have these hard conversations in the community, right? Not afraid to have these hard conversations in the community, in places, where it's across the aisle, to talk across the aisle with other politicians and at every level of government who are going to really look deeply at our system and how we can make public schools as strong as they used to be. You know, North Carolina used to be known as the education state.
Yes, I remember that.
So
We used to
how
have
can
really
we get
good
back
ratings.
to it? Right?
Yes.
Right. So how can we get back there?
That is the question. That's a hard one. Yeah, and I feel like there's just so much anti-tax sentiment, and it's legit. You know, this is a bit of a side channel, but it still speaks to where does the money come from. I've loosely teamed up with Patriotic Millionaires, who wants to raise the minimum wage and change the tax laws to where these loopholes that I described no longer exist, especially for high earners, and then use that money to lower tax rates for those earning only barely enough to live on. And my thought is that if the cost of living in your town is $43,000 a year and you're making $30,000 a year, you probably don't need to be paying $2,000 or $3,000 in taxes on top of that. You know, I think people who are making $700,000 or $800,000 a year don't need to be loopholing that down to $150 a year. Those folks need instead to be paying the actual percentage and letting those in those lower middle classes have some relief. And I think if we can do that, then we can sell the idea on overall raising a little bit more money to invest in our future. And another side channel, but worthy of discussion, is that the money in politics, the dark money, the uncontrolled PAC money, is why the tax laws are the way they are. If everyday voters had the same kind of power as millionaires, millionaires wouldn't have these tax breaks.
Right.
And that's another thing I want to fix. It's a huge battle, and it seems separate from education, but it's not. Because to me, that battle, which we're currently losing, is the main reason why we can't fund education, because the billionaires have all the talking points. They're controlling the media in a large way, and they're controlling the ad space, and they're controlling a lot of the talk radio talking heads who they fund. So of course they're going to tell us that they need to pay less taxes and we need to pay more. That's the message they've been gearing for 30 years to tell us, and we're listening, unfortunately.
Yeah, and one thing I appreciate that you just hit on is I think all Americans right now are craving transparency and honesty. If we have learned nothing else with these past few election cycles, it's that we need open, honest, transparent conversations about what's going on in our public schools, truthful conversations about what's going on in our public schools, and what it will take to get us more funding.
Let's talk a bit about voucher programs and charter schools. The idea behind these, to me, sounds good because I like personal freedom. I like people having the ability to take their education budget and use it how they want. I like the idea of more competition in schooling. I like the idea of more options. But the way these processes are set up functionally, at least per what Natalie tells me, because she is the education expert in the family, the way these things are set up, both the charter schools and the voucher programs end up pulling money out of public schools, making them weaker, making them less competitive, and then causing people to go more toward these voucher programs and these private schools and these side schools, charter schools. Sorry, and I think that's a potential vicious cycle. That the public schools are potentially getting weaker through this program, which pushes people more towards the charter schools, more towards the private schools. Do you want to speak on that? How that program that came up with this idea of personal freedom now seems to be bending towards something that is weakening the public schools.
Yeah, I do. And really to take it one step further and start from the outcome is actually by weakening the public schools and all these students, moving to charters and privates, what actually happens is the children who are left behind are the ones whose families cannot afford to drive them across town to the private or charter school. That the schools that don't have to offer transportation, they don't have to offer lunch or breakfast, and so it's widening the divide between the haves and the have-nots.
I'm glad you're bringing that up because that's where, not as a capitalist, but as a human, as a Democrat, I believe every child has the right to good food and a great education, to give them their fair shot at chasing after the American dream. And it pains me to see areas where the schools are so bad and the nutrition is so bad that you have kids going to school hungry, staying that way, and not learning because their teachers are overwhelmed and don't have the resources. And those kids are going to end up in that same situation. Those counties, those sections of those states are never going to come out of that generational poverty until we fix the education system and give everyone a fair shot.
Right. Absolutely. And it is a system. And I will just say, like, as a teacher with a partner who works full time, we have benefited from free and reduced school lunch. And, our children are on Medicaid, and it is something that if it were not in place as a teacher, I don't know how I could go in and teach my own students while my own children didn't have access to health care or didn't have full bellies. So it's broken on all kinds of levels.
Yes.
That, our teachers are paid so poorly that their own children need to access free and reduced meals at school. What was the original question again?
We were talking about the start was
system.
the charter schools and the the private school vouchers, the charter schools. But I wanted to add, kind of on your note of the finance, that the big beautiful bill is pulling $27 billion out of Medicaid in North Carolina, and also is, as far as I know, trying to shut down the Head Start programs, which I'd like to talk about more as well. I don't know if that's your area of expertise, but I'm a huge fan of these programs. Natalie worked in one of these for 3 years and not only loved it, but made an enormous difference for these kids who otherwise wouldn't have gotten those square meals and that early education, and for their parents who got to go to work because of this program.
Right.
It was pretty cheap. The amount of money we put in a Head Start is nothing compared to those benefits.
Yeah, I know.
And they're being cut right now. Like right now in the House of Reps, they're bouncing it back and forth. They're going to cut Head Start.
Yeah.
It's terrible. So billionaires can get more tax breaks.
Yeah, I know. Not because I've personally used Head Start or worked in Head Start, but my children have gone through Asheville City Schools preschool, and I know the value of being able not only just to drop my kids off somewhere so I could work, but the education they got, the early intervention. One of my children received speech services there and was able to quickly move through that program.
Where without that, they may have missed those crucial formative years
Right.
to fix that speech problem, and may have gone on handicapped for life due to that.
Right. Well, and as a special education teacher, I know that, speech problems can also lead to not being able to hear how words are formed. And so that can affect how quickly they pick up reading, or if they pick up reading. So it's all interconnected. They receive interventions and also just incidental learning on how to get along, like you talked about, which is a crucial skill to being able to access their learning down the road, and also how to be a productive citizen. I, as a teacher, earlier I said I was in and out as a teacher at Woodfin. It's because as a teacher, when I had my second child, I looked at my paycheck and I looked at the price of how much it cost to send my kids through preschool, and I was going to bring home $600 a month. So I had to step out of the classroom because it wasn't worth it to our family.
Yes, that is a huge problem.
Right.
Our workforce is being hindered by the high cost of childcare. It's a bit of a sidetrack, but something that I think is worth talking about. Do you know of a way to fix it? Obviously, we put a large amount of public funding into childcare, like most successful, wealthy nations do. We could fix the problem. Are there some other ideas on the regulatory side, on the efficiency side, that we could perhaps minimize the amount of money we'd have to put into the system, but still provide universally accessible childcare for low-income earners so they can go to work and make money and be a part of the system?
Yeah, I've actually worked in a private preschool. So I know from that experience that running a preschool is also expensive. When I was at that preschool, I got paid about $13.10 an hour. And that was a well-paid preschool position, and that was only 10 years ago. So, running a preschool is expensive. You've got to buy materials, and these materials are going to age out, and you have to replace them as soon as they start to, get a little torn up for safety purposes. And there's all of the other operational expenses and, taking care of your staff that matter, and it adds up. And so I think in terms of what it's going to take for us to have better preschool, early childhood education opportunities, it is going to take money. And what it's going to take is making it more affordable for families and opening up the number of slots. There are just not enough slots.
Long waiting list. We had a lot of trouble getting our kids in, and our budget was much more open than a lot of people's, and we still had, a long time where we had to figure out other things before we could get them into childcare.
I mean, it's, even with our first 14 years ago, I remember putting him on a waiting list while I was pregnant and hoping that
it came through.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
So it's early childhood education is also desperately in need of more funding. And while we can look for efficiencies, there's no way around it, but through it, it's going to take funding. And it's going to take making it affordable and making sure there's enough slots for all families to have access to childcare so that they can work.
So what about a sliding scale income-based access, where you are never in a situation where your full-time job doesn't pay enough to pay for your childcare and bring home significant money? For example, in that situation where you would have brought home $600 a month by working like crazy all month, that we bend those numbers a little bit. And, again, it's going to take money. But again, we're leaving a lot of money on the table. I mean, Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos had years they paid 0 federal income tax. We can get that money from them.
Right.
And we can use that.
Right.
To help out the middle class and to help parents be able to work. Because the other thing with that work time is so many women in particular become the child raiser, and they end up missing crucial years of career growth, where they have to step out for 2 or 3 or 4 years until they can get them into preschool. And during that time, their careers are stagnating, they're being replaced, their skills are getting outdated, where if they instead were able to afford childcare and stay in their careers, they could progress and pay more taxes and make more money. So I see this as one of those things where, yes, it would take money to expand access to preschool, but I think that most or all of it would end up paying back in the form of more people working, of businesses being able to move forward by hiring people instead of still having open vacancies, because the person who's right for that job has to be a stay-at-home mom or stay-at-home dad instead.
Also, when a mom's not working, they are more likely to lean on other things like SNAP benefits, Medicaid. So it's a give and take.
Benefit.
Right.
There'd be an immediate benefit. And the other thing with that, and again, going back to a sliding scale, is it is amazing how often I talk to people who say, yeah, I got this job offer and it's great, but I can't take it because I'll lose my SNAP benefits and I'll lose Medicaid for my kid. So in my mind, yes, we want to encourage people to work, and we want to encourage people to put that money into the system and not rely so much on these government programs, which are expensive. So why do we still have this counterproductive system that discourages people from working? My thought instead would be a sliding scale, where let's say you're on SNAP, you're on Medicaid, and you get a job that pays you $30,000 a year. You keep your SNAP, you keep your Medicaid, but you're paying into them with some of that $30,000 a year. And you're never in a situation where the decision to go to work puts you in a financial detriment. It seems simple, and it's something we could do, but we're not, because we're too busy fighting over all of this left versus right and all of these billionaire dark money powers that are teaching us to hate each other. And it's just one of those many simple problems that we can fix if we get together and talk about them and fix them.
Absolutely. And, you wonder about if those decisions are being made in the best interest of all Americans or in the best interest of a few Americans. And
it is where the power lies, in the few.
It's about power.
It is.
Which brings it back to the vouchers, and widening the divide between the haves and the have-nots.
It's terrifying. I feel like we're heading back towards feudal times. It may sound extremist to say that, but some of the rhetoric coming out of the current administration is the same kind of thing that feudal kings would say, that, you know, we are the champions and we are the gifted few and we should have the resources, and, you know, the serfs and the peasants should just suffer, and that's their lot in life. And I see some of those mentalities coming forward amongst, you know, the elitist wealthy class, and it's kind of terrifying. I'm not a fan.
Right. So we were talking about how funding works at the state level. And we were talking, I think your question was about like how we could maybe make sure that our students get what they need at the state level. Currently, our schools are funded using a model that's based on attendance. It's called ADM, Average Daily Membership. And so our state allocates funding to our schools based on how many students attend. Right now, they're looking at a new way of doing funding, and it's called a weighted student funding model. And it's based on some students require more materials, more specialized instruction, meaning smaller groups, smaller classes. And so some students cost more to educate.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it all theoretically sounds like a better way to move.
It does sound good. That sounds like potential progress.
Right.
I want to hear about so many things that are going downhill on the political side for education, so it's nice to see a little bit of a silver lining, so to speak, of something that maybe we are improving.
Yeah, I'm hopeful. I got to say I'm skeptical, only because it's coming from our General Assembly that has underfunded our schools for years. So I think it's something that we need to watch.
Yeah, that could be a good step, though.
Yeah. Something else we need to watch, though, is what this current administration is going to do with their attempts to dismantle the Department of Education.
That sounds really scary, especially since, correct me if I'm wrong, the Department of Education funding goes to a lot of those special needs and more difficult students, and they're going to be the ones who are left out, and they're the ones who need our education system the most.
Right. So I know that in Buncombe County, between Buncombe County and Asheville City Schools, we stand to lose over $15 million just from Title I and IDEA funding alone.
Oh.
And you're right, that funding goes to our students who are more vulnerable, and they need smaller class sizes, they need specialized instruction that happens only in small groups.
Hey. So what's going to physically happen? That's a lot of money.
Right.
You can't just, like, you know, find a cheaper source for notebook paper and save $15 million. That's a heavy hit. Yeah,
and I can tell you, as a special education teacher, you can't just increase those class sizes and expect it to still function the same, or for the students to receive the instruction that they need. So that's a good question. I don't know what will happen.
Oh, come on, give me an answer. Tell me there's a way to fix it.
Yeah, I think our school districts would have to make hard decisions once again.
Yeah.
You know, and
again, these are unpopular, hard decisions, especially when you've got the federal government pulling out this source that has traditionally been ours and pulling it out to fund what, in my opinion, are largely tax breaks for the wealthy. And then you're asking the middle class of a state to then cover the difference. That's going to be a tough pill to swallow.
Right. And if the current administration wants our states to step up and do more in the way of funding our schools, then that's what needs to happen, and they need to start working towards that, and they need to get there fast.
Absolutely. And that brings up another point about equality, where, you know, you and I and Natalie on our break were talking about some states are responsible and good for education and some are not. And it's not fair that if you happen to be born in state X versus state Y, that you receive a worse education and have a lesser chance of getting at the American dream. To me, that's a universal right. A solid education, an ability to make money and live a good life. So it frustrates me that the central administration is pushing more towards allowing the states to decide how important education is, because some states, in my opinion, are making the wrong decision, including North Carolina. Yeah,
and we can even see that in our own county. With the way our schools are currently funded, schools only get a certain amount of money based on how many students they have. And so in our more rural districts, for example, the Owen district here in Buncombe County, they have smaller schools, and so they receive less funding. So the students at Owen High have less classes, less course options, less programs that they're able to take part in, as compared to students in a more populated district that receives more money, and so they're able to offer more programs and courses.
I hadn't thought of that economy of scale being unfair for rural areas. And it's another thing that widens the rural versus urban divide, which I think is entirely unfair. I think that those living in rural areas should have the same opportunities as those living in urban areas, and that's a prime example of something we can fix.
Well, and going back to the vouchers, vouchers are used for families to choose to send their children to a private school. Most of our counties that are rural do not have private schools. And so... While
the options are really limited.
Right. And
so that's another place that serves the urban school family much better than the rural, which is not what we want.
So our rural school districts are receiving less money because of the voucher system, but their students in their county, the children in their county, are not benefiting from going to a private school or a charter school because they just don't have them.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point to bring up. I think there's a lot of unfairness going on in the education system, and I think it is the one place where I am unabashedly socialist, because again, the capitalist in me tells me to be a socialist about schools. The capitalist in me tells me that I will retire sooner and wealthier if we have good schools. So to me, it's a no-brainer, and I would love to see less fighting and more looking at what our optimal scenario is. So I'll ask you that. What are the ratios now? What is the money now? And you can use just a specific example of a grade or general knowledge. What do you think needs to be changed to make education even stronger, to accomplish these goals that we were speaking of earlier of being able to jump right into a trade straight out of school or already having a head start on college? So I think doing that would decrease the high school dropout rate. It would dramatically decrease unemployment. It would improve the power of businesses like mine to hire people and to make money.
Yeah, I think that's it's a really nuanced question because it depends on the county. Even in Buncombe County, we have Asheville City versus that has a special city schools tax. And so it kind of changes what the ratios of students to teacher can be. And so it depends also on the needs of the community. In some communities, we find that we do need those extra positions that are working with school social workers, with community schools programs to make sure that there's a wraparound for our students to make sure that they're fed not just at school but at home as well, that they have access to laundry. Students not having clean clothes affects attendance rates, and so you think about even little things like that. Sometimes we have to create positions like that in the schools to make sure all those needs are met. So what is optimal is for the decision makers, the politicians in locals, in states, to listen to their constituents and most especially to listen to the experts who work in our schools every day with our students about what the needs truly are, and make sure that the right amount of funding gets to those places so that we can hire more professionals who are there to make sure that our students are safe, that they're healthy, that they're taken care of, so that they have the greatest opportunity they can to thrive and become the next layer of decision makers in our world.
Absolutely. I like that. Yay. Thank you very much. Thank you so much for coming over today, Shanna.
Yeah.
This is great.
For having me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.